All right, we are in Las Vegas for the WCC tournament. It is Championship Tuesday, Gonzaga and Saint Mary's, and we have Rocco Miller from Bracketeer.org, one of the better bracketologists out there. Rocco, we got to see the semifinals last night. We got to see Gonzaga. We got to see Saint Mary's. What were your impressions? Because it looked like we kind of got to see these two teams the way we kind of used to seeing them.
Yeah, they were right in their element, Zach, and good to be with you here live. This is fun. I would just say, from the St. Mary standpoint, who was in the first game against Santa Clara, that game started tight. I believe it was 23 all at one point. Looked like Santa Clara would put up a fight, but it was the classic St. Mary's on 9 days of prep, or even like anything above 4 days of prep. The master Randy Bennett just carved that team up and got them out of their rhythm. And of course, they were missing their big guy, Virginia transfer for Faro. So that was a tough break for Santa Clara. But I think St. Mary's was going to eventually enforce their will. I think they're doing a really nice job of. But one thing he did really well managing the game was Mitchell Saxon only played 24 minutes. And the thing, I think we talked about before last night's game was how are they going to approach this? They've been in this situation countless times, and they were expected to beat Santa Clara. Obviously, you have to respect them; they're good enough to lose to that or be beat by the Broncos. But how do you prepare for Tuesday? How do you turn around and get ready for this? You had to assume they were going to play Gonzaga. And I thought he did a nice job. Like managing Saxon's minutes was really important. You saw, Marshall Otis get his. Mason Forbes got some confidence going. Thought he had a nice night. And by and large, they got a few guys off the bench a little bit more time than we're used to seeing. I think when they played Gonzaga last time, they basically only played six guys. So that was my first impression on the St. Mary side of things. On the Gonzaga side, they got a little bit of a fight from San Francisco as they have each of the times they've played. San Francisco came into the game trying to take away Graham Ike. I think largely they succeeded. He had a bunch of bunnies. He missed all of them except for two. But the rest of the team really picked up the slack. Ryan Nemhard is just out of control, awesome. He's on this crazy stretch for the last 3-4 weeks straight, including a couple San Francisco games. Now we'll see a second St. Mary's game tonight. Getting everybody involved. Anton Watson had a great shooting night, had a lot of open looks. You have to give Nemhard credit for, helping create that. Nolan Hickman, they ran a lot of stuff through Hickman last night. And so there really wasn't too much on Nemhard's shoulders, like, once they got a controllable lead, which happened right after halftime, just like it did last time. And by the 10-minute mark, this thing was over. They're up 16-18, somewhere in that range. And now it's just kind of the inevitable. It feels like we're watching the same movie, Zach. Every year it's Gonzaga St. Mary's. So, what's going to happen this year that's going to be different? That's my big question.
Yeah, and it's like as you kind of pointed out, it's like it's a repeat episode. We're here at Gonzaga St. Mary's one more time, and even the USF Gonzaga game was kind of a repeat of what we saw at Chase Center just a couple weeks ago. And just looking at the differences of what we've seen so far with at least like maybe the adjustments that St. Mary's has made, it looked like the way that Mason Forbes was being used was different. Like we saw him cutting to the basket more, being a little bit more kind of like inserting himself into the paint. Where against Gonzaga, we saw him a little bit more like on that kind of like that wing perimeter position, and Gonzaga just kind of left him alone and let him sit out there by himself. So it seems like that might be one of the changes we see that St. Mary's uses a little bit more in this one, especially considering, I mean, like as you kind of point out, like the minutes usage for Mitchell Saxon is going to be critical. With like he got in the foul trouble last night. He did end up fouling out in 25 minutes, and this because of the St. Mary's depth or the lack thereof. It's like it's important, and it did sound after the press conference that we won't see Harry Wessels in this one, so we can't, right. So we won't see that another big man be able to kind of be in there. But USF, you mentioned it. We were talking about it. I think it was during the game yesterday, the USF game yesterday, that maybe USF was starting to lay a little bit of a blueprint of how to deal with EK.
Yeah.
On just that little bit of like just kind of like force him to make it difficult to make the others beat. Well, of course, the others did beat USF and last night, but I think if you take away, it does seem like it's a more reliable resource that is EK. Maybe it gives you a better chance to be able to knock off the Zags.
I think so, but it's just really what we learned yesterday, and if you watched it, all three of the San Francisco matchups, it's just so hard to sustain for 40 minutes. They did it for what, 16 minutes? It's not even half the game. And one of the things, that Gonzaga did in the last St. Mary's game was they really owned both the post and the ball screen game. And, I think what San Francisco did so well that you're talking about was a lot of that post game. So, primarily Ike as the roller, as the guy, you can't let him get too deep into the paint. If he catches the ball 2 feet from the basket, you're done. San Francisco did a nice job making sure he's at least 6 feet, 8 feet away from the hoop. So that's a big key. But I think the ball screen game just is key because he'll come up, set screens. You have Watson setting screens, and if they're rolling, and Nemhard's going to find the roller every time, or cutters, and they mix actions. They can run it through Hickman. So that is just where St. Mary's got blistered, the kind of more than you're used to seeing from a Randy Bennett coach team. And I think historically, I always trust Randy on prep. This is the quick turnaround. So I'm just curious. They had 9 days. How much of those 9 days did they spend on Gonzaga, knowing this is probably what it was coming down to, like better chance than not. So,
right. Especially when it was only 10 days ago when they last saw each other. So at least there's like almost recent memory.
exactly.
And they probably spent a lot of the last week just like looking at that tape. And it sounds like a good number of the guys were also kind of thinking it's like we did not play well in that game. Alex Dukas mentioned that in the post game yesterday, that we did not play well. Mitchell Saxon mentioned it after the game last Saturday. We did not play well. And so it does seem like that these guys understand that they made a number of mistakes that they can fix. That this isn't an insurmountable thing. And obviously, this is a team that beat Gonzaga in Spokane just in early February, so they know they're capable of doing it. And yes, the Josh Jefferson component is still floating in there, and that's going to be continue to be talked about as the missing piece. But if Sanders can actually pull this off tonight and pull through without a Josh Jefferson, I think it kind of signals that maybe this Sanders team is actually still capable of doing damage once we get to the tournaments, because I think that's been a little bit of a concern of how are they going to do without him. And last night, I think, was maybe the first real indication of what maybe they are capable of without him.
Right. Yeah. No, I think, that ship has sailed. Life without Josh Jefferson is here to stay. And, they have to make these adjustments. I think Forbes is a key piece to give them that extra depth. Obviously, Marshallonis has taken over as the primary, not only defender, but also ball handler. So he's so important on both sides. And I think, the biggest thing to me, not only in that game that just happened at the end of the season in Moraga, but also here last year in the championship game, was Gonzaga just threw a different wrinkle at them with some, three-quarter court, half-court ball pressure, really daring St. Mary's guards to get the ball, into their offense. And they really kind of took away their half-court offense before it could even be set up. And that, I mean, when Gonzaga built that double-digit lead in the first half, they got there that way, in Moraga. And I think that's just such a key piece because so uncharacteristic for St. Mary's, but they gave up 17 transition points. And in the first matchup, the one they won, they only give up one transition point. So that is a huge factor today. If I'm Gonzaga, I would do it a third time. Like, you don't have to do it right when the game starts, but these guys, both Hall of Fame coaches, Mark Few, Randy Bennett, they're going to play chess. It's going to be that's my favorite part, is seeing the chess match. And from an entertainment perspective, we'll hope it doesn't get as ugly as last year, because that game was over in the first 10 minutes. So we'll hope for a better game. But I think Gonzaga's edge here is athlete for athlete. They've got better athletes. They got bigger bodies, and that's why they have an advantage in the screen game. And if they want to do the ball pressure game, I mean, that's where they can just really dare St. Mary's to challenge them big time. And I think that we'll get to a point in that game. In this game with that, I don't know if it's going to be earlier or later, but really something to watch for.
Oh yeah, for sure. I was actually commenting on that earlier, that it's that ball pressure, it's that three-quarter press, because again, to your point, that we've seen this be a problem for St. Mary's over the last few years when Gonzaga utilizes that tool that's in their bag, and as it has sped up St. Mary's more to the point that they don't like. And I think one of their challenges for tonight is going to be if they can handle that press and not allow it to speed them up unnaturally, and still kind of in the flow of their offense, that will actually serve them well. And I think last night we saw a little bit of that because St. Mary's played faster against Santa Clara a little bit. We saw them actually get out on the break a little bit more often. We saw them initiate offense quicker against the Broncos. And if they do that a little bit more against Gonzaga and can break that press and feel comfortable breaking that press, I think that's going to help them immensely in this game. Now, that doesn't mean to say that they're going to win this game.
Right.
I think that that's a huge component, because if they have that become a serious problem in this game, this could get ugly fast because Gonzaga will put the pedal to the metal, and they've been playing well for the last 2 months, really well for the last 2 months offensively.
Jeez.
And
Yeah, I mean, Ryan,
historically good.
historically good. And as somebody that covers, the national scene, I don't think there's anybody out there playing better basketball, at least statistically, than Ryan Nembhard. And visually, I think he meets that as well. Tons of great point guards across the country, but I mean, he's at the top of his game. Whether it's here or Creighton or before. So it's hard to see the buzzsaw getting interrupted, but and of course the other factor, Spokane South, they'll have basically 90% plus Gonzaga backers. They were just here watching the women's final, getting their heart broken, so they probably don't want to get their heart broken twice today. So that's an interesting element. But yeah, so I'm really interested to see. I'm more interested in St. Mary's. I'm almost depending on Gonzaga to do what they do. I would be thrilled to see St. Mary's. Not that I have a dog in the fight here, but I would be thrilled to see St. Mary's be able to match that level of athleticism, intensity, and overcome some of that adversity that they haven't been able to do when Gonzaga's really turned it on them. So I think that's a big question mark for the Gales tonight.
Yeah. You mentioned Spokane South, and yes, this place turns into the Kennel South every year. It's even when BYU was here and they took up a little bit more of the building. This place still felt like Spokane. Have you been to the Kennel?
I've never been. I've never been inside for a game. I've been there and shot around in like a summertime thing, but no, I haven't.
Okay, I know it's like you've been everywhere, but not there yet.
Yeah.
And you've been in this building a few times, especially like for the WCC championship. How it's like when this crowd gets going. How do you compare this to some of the others you have seen across the country?
Well, for a conference tournament, it's up there with the top advantages. Even if St. John's is good every like once a decade, the Garden will still be overtaken with like UConn fans and Villanova fans. So it's not like they have the Garden. This is like bona fide, almost home court, even though it's hundreds of miles away. The factor is can't get tickets to the Kennel if you live there. Not the everyday person can, and so they'll save up and get their butts down here. They'll get a cheap room over here and come right over and get reasonable price tickets. And you can hold a lot more Gonzaga fans here, so it makes sense. So I would just say, yeah, nationally, it's probably up there with one of the top conference tournament advantages. UNLV plays on their home court, but the Mountain West has great fans, and you'll have people from everywhere at the Mountain West tournament. And UNLV's not the same fan base as Gonzaga. At the Pac-12, you have Arizona takes over, but it's not like this. It's not this level. Like we're talking 90% plus. I think if the common person just reads the game on paper and says, "Hey, they're playing in Vegas, great neutral game," no, it's not. These Gonzaga guys have a huge advantage here, and they thrive off it. And it seems like every time I'm here, 4 straight years I've been here now. There's always a point in each game I've seen where they just get really hot, they get in the flow. Next thing you know, you look up, kind of like last night, they go from like up 2 to up 14. You're like, what just happened? And then you're done.
Exactly, and the energy in this building is completely. Overwhelmingly for Gonzaga, and even when you're walking through the Orleans Casino, it's like that. They're everywhere, and I think about even as a St. Mary's fan, like we wear more or less the same red and blue colors. It's always like kind of walking through, you see with someone with that red or the blue, you kind of like peek around to the front of the shirt to see, and 90% of the time it's a Gonzaga person.
Right.
But yeah, it's like that's kind of the vibe in this building. It is a neutral. It is neutral technically, but there's nothing neutral about this site for WCC opponents not in Gonzaga. So thinking about these teams, because these two teams are going to be in. That we've talked about this before.
Yep.
What is the ceiling for these two teams if they have a perfect matchup in the tournament? What is kind of the ceiling for these two? Are these two capable of getting into the second weekend? It does feel like the Zags have figured out about that a 9th straight trip to the Sweet 16 is very possible for them. For St. Mary's, with the injuries, maybe it's a little bit more of a question mark. But how far do you think these two teams are capable of if they have the right matchups?
Yeah, I think first of all, St. Mary's. My concern has been for them. I like pretty much, going in blind. Obviously, there's certain opponents like a McNeese or somebody who I think is freakishly athletic and super dangerous. So all bets off if they have to play McNeese. But a lot of the teams, Randy's going to be so prepped and have these guys so prepped. And this is a very high IQ basketball program. This team, no different. They'll have the edge up mentally, and a lot of their games, especially in that situation, they'll have the opponent beat before the game even starts. So I always like St. Mary's in that first round game, but then you have the one day off and turnaround, and that's where I think St. Mary's needs to prove it to me. And that's why I can't really predict a second weekend. But hey, you might get an upset in that round. A lot of things can happen. Gonzaga, obviously, right now playing like a top 10 team. There's no doubt about it. They've won at Kentucky. They've won at St. Mary's. Even their game at San Francisco, the game last night, all basically handled those teams, like leaving no doubt. Of course, they're rolling with 7 guys. Not the most ideal, so they need their health to stay intact. But even St. Mary's themselves probably only play primarily 6 people tonight. So we're at that point in the year where coaches know who needs to be out there. And if an injury happens, then you reach deeper in the bench. But Gonzaga, sky's the limit. Like today I had Gonzaga playing Princeton in a 6-11. Nobody wants to play Princeton, believe me. But, I mean, these guys are just so athletic. It'd be really hard, I think, even for Princeton, who doesn't make mistakes, to get over the hump over 40 minutes. So, yeah, I think Gonzaga's poised to make a deep run, but we'll see what happens tonight.
All right, thanks, Rocco, for hopping on.
Yeah.
We are here again at the Orleans Arena for the WCC Championship. Gonzaga, Saint Mary's at 6 o'clock. And this is going to be a fun one.
Absolutely, and also I just quick shout out to Alex Dukas. He's going to tie the St. Mary's record tonight, 149th appearance as a Gale ties Tommy Kusi. So when they play that first tournament game, he'll break the record.
Awesome, man. Congrats to Alex. He's been one of the best.
He is.
All right. Thanks, Rocco.
Thank you
for listening, and we'll catch you.